light within our hearts, light within our minds, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Eric Breault of Quantum Tones Healing. And today we wanted to have a discussion about competition versus nurturing within interpersonal relationships. My experience of competition has always been very negative. I was always the last one picked for teams on the playground and so forth. The sports that consequently attracted me were basically the non-competitive ones. If you were competing at all, you were competing against yourself, trying to raise the standard or raise the level of accomplishment, to know that you were increasing your ability, that you were empowering yourself, that you were becoming a capable, desirable human being.
But I'm learning that as we evolve, that I noticed through the school system with the kids, I've seen activities that are team building, collaborative efforts where they come together and it's not competitive. And they actually come together and there is no right or wrong, there is no judgment upon each other. It's amazing how they work together as a team. When they realize there's no competitiveness, they actually become almost like one community together.
Oh, so kind of like the African word Ubuntu.
Yeah, like that. And
that I am because we are. Because the individual child feels part of a team, they feel like they're someone. Yes, they retain all their individuality, but by being a member of the team, they also know that they're valued. And I would rather they know that they're valued for who they are than to look in the mirror and see themselves as valuable because they were better than somebody else, or because, if a child's self-esteem depends upon beating someone at whatever activity, that to me will leave them in a very insecure place. Because at some point, whether due to age or whatever, if they carry that principle or that perception with them throughout life, at some point there's going to be someone younger and stronger who comes along, and if your value, if your personal self-worth is based on being the best in whatever area, at some point you're no longer going to be the best. And do you then have to look in the mirror and consider yourself worthless? Or can we set a better standard in the beginning?
And the thing is, that's a challenge in our society, as we are based on competitiveness. And people, that's something that's going to be a challenge to break down. It may take a long time for that competitiveness.
Yeah, it's very entrenched in our societal thinking.
Oh, it is very entrenched in there. And it'll be there for quite some time till we evolve to the point that we realize, okay, we don't need to be competitive anymore. It is important to be collaborative and working together.
Well, and it is important to develop yourself.
Yeah, it is.
To expand your abilities, to increase your strength, but you don't have to beat somebody to do that.
No. We can be empowered through team building work activities where they just come together, and I'll give you an example of a team building activity where students line up and then they all have to figure out their birth dates from January to December. And they go to month. They do activities. First they start with a month, then all the kids cannot talk to each other. So they have to develop.
They have to do it non-verbally.
Yeah, non-verbally. So they have to strategize. So where they create strategies. Where one example, the months were like this was a month. So they did that. Then they all lined up. And then they had to do the month and the year. And they strategized, and then they lined up there. Then the month, the date, and the year. So it's just like it's interesting to see them line up and what.
So when you first put the activity before them, you say, okay, line up according to month.
Yep.
So they only have one point of focus.
Yep.
Okay. Because then if it was clear that whatever number they're showing was the month,
Yeah.
that would, see, otherwise, if you throw the whole thing at once, line up in order of age and whatever, essentially they're having to invent the equivalent of American Sign Language. So that somehow they will have to flounder around through gestures until it becomes apparent whether they're signaling the month, whether they're signaling the day, or whether they're signaling the year. And so someone might make a really big arm motion, and someone else might assume that since that was such a big arm motion, it must mean the year rather than the day.
Yeah, the year one is a little more complicated when you add that in there, but usually they start with a month and the day. But if you want to be more difficult, they'll add the year in
But
there.
it's ways that we assign symbols
Yeah,
and agree upon what those symbols mean.
yeah. And it's not, there's no competition involved. It's about developing strategies, and it's very empowering for the kids. When they're doing it, they're all happy that, we did it together. And there's no other group doing the same thing at the same time, because other groups are doing different kind of team building activities where there are no competitiveness. And I've actually done some of these activities in college too, where I went to college in human services, and we did a lot of stuff like this, team building, where we worked together. And it's just, and also we learn from each other, and it's empowering. That's all I have to say about it. So,
Well,
yeah.
it reminds me of the one chapter, probably the most wonderful chapter, in a book called "Everything I Need to Know About Life I Learned in Kindergarten." This man was charged with, the author was charged with overseeing all of the Sunday school classes while they had some big church meeting where all the parents were and everything. So he was the only adult down there with all of this room full of kids. And he said, okay, there are giants, trolls, and elves. Decide which you are now. And go to your respective corners and prepare to parade across the room. And he feels this little tug on his sleeve, and there's a little girl standing next to him, and she says, where do the mermaids stand? And he first says, well, there are no mermaids. And he says, yes, there are. I'm one. And so he had to quick think, how do you respond to someone who recognizes they don't fit the established categories? And so he just, off the top of his head, said, right here next to the king of the sea. To which, under his breath, he thought, king of all fools, what a ridiculous person I am. So this is so wonderfully written in the book, but I'm doing a poor paraphrase here, but basically, he stands there with this young girl who has identified herself as a mermaid, as the giants and trolls and elves parade by in wild array, and he ends his reflection by saying, and it is not true that there are no such things as mermaids. I know because I held her hand. But the whole chapter is this reflection on how do we lovingly respond and inclusively respond to people who don't fit the established categories. I was at an event once where the leader wanted to orchestrate this dance, and he wanted all the men over here and all the women over there, and I said, where do the gay men stand? Because I'm not exactly in either category. According to the dynamic that he was wanting to act out, and they didn't really have any place for people who didn't fall into the two polarities to be. We can compete with ourselves, reaching for a higher standard, more than we've ever done before. But when it depends upon a loser, in some ways, the losses I experienced in childhood will never end.
There are no losers. There are no winners. It just is.
Ideally.
Ideally. That's the essence of who we are. There are no winners. There are no losers. It just is. It's just...
Well, if I might add,
yeah.
The winners are those who succeed in being themselves.
That's a different kind of win.
The losers are those who wind up a caricature of who they really are because they're trying so hard to satisfy other demands for competition from the world around them.
And that's why with the competitive society, we have winners and losers in this existence we live in. It is because of that. There are winners and losers because that's where the polarities come in the picture of the energy. That third dimensional kind of rule, because each dimension has a different set of rules, but that's getting off the subject matter. But this particular dimension, we have that competitiveness. But that's not.
But in the end, it's society that loses because we don't get the best that each individual has to offer.
No, because we have competitiveness, so it doesn't allow us that ability.
Well, and when you establish a category of competition,
yeah.
you assume those abilities and aptitudes within the participants.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that the participants who have been assigned to that category are much better at something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If they only had the freedom to go where their gift was, mm-hmm. instead of going where they were assigned.
And it's just following their passion, their love, and where they belong, and mm-hmm. where they go. Having their specific groups together, like a team building groups, they go to groups and they don't pay attention to any other groups, what they're doing, because they have a different activity. So some kids are quicker than others, but nobody even mentions who's quick, who's fast, who's slow. Everybody just does it. Mm-hmm. It's about, as a group, doing it together.
It seems to me there's also much more to be gained by inviting it to come from within the people, within the participants themselves.
Yeah.
You know, by creating opportunity for discoveries to be made, for things to come out.
Yeah, many discoveries. People learn to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
Just verbally, not verbally speak to each other, but learn how to speak to each other through body language. So because of that, they learn to see each other, speak to each other in the eye, develop more eye contact, develop more of a connection, develop more of a sense of being important as a group. Because all of us as humanity are important. Each of us offer something within this plate of diversity that's there for us, before us.
And in some cases, it's the person who would otherwise be designated a certain category, mm-hmm. who has a discovery to share that nobody anticipated.
Yeah.
I mean, who expected Louis Braille to create the Braille alphabet? You know, and it's used everywhere across the country now, mm-hmm. everywhere. It had to be invented at some point by someone who had never seen such a thing before, because there was nothing like the Braille alphabet before it was invented.
No.
It didn't exist.
No.
But somebody had to create the space where he could create the system that became the Braille alphabet.
That's that uniqueness and that creativity there, that creative expression. Through his life experiences, mm-hmm. he realized that, yes, there is a better way, and there is a way I can be supportive for humanity, supporting those who are blind.
You know, the one that absolutely takes the cake, and I apologize, I don't remember her name, but I saw it on a video on the internet. This young woman who wanted more than anything to become a gymnast, and did a remarkable job. And I mean, I saw some of the videos of her performance, and it's incredible. The one big catch to all that is, and she's so lucky she had parents who wouldn't tell her that she couldn't do it, she has no legs.
Oh, I think I've heard that.
She's a gymnast with a torso and 2 arms and a head, but has no legs. And she's, you know, they got her into gymnastics. They taught her how to bounce and do flips and do work on the bars and all sorts of things. It's amazing to watch her perform, but she has no legs. but she's a gymnast. Who would have thought? But that's the kind of wonderful support and openness and possibility
That's amazing.
that competition couldn't invent.
No. And then I give an example, like a blind person learning to ride a bike using echolocation.
Yeah, echolocation.
It's that creativity there.
I met a blind person once who swore he could tell where the parked cars were by tapping his cane. I'm sorry, I listened. I couldn't tell the difference.
I know. That's amazing with the potential that humanity has. Through being, especially if we have a collaborative effort, we can create more things that will be benefit for the community as a whole, as well as the collective as a whole. That's what creates advancement. That unique creativity where that's within us that needs to be expressed. And some of these people only can express it through their life challenges. And sometimes the life challenges help us open up because we're too quiet or whatever.
But if I don't mean to keep railing on competition so much, but I find competition distracts us from so many other more worthy efforts.
Mm-hmm.
If we just set competition beside and said, okay, how far can we go and in how many directions can we go? Another video I discovered online was I think it's in Mexico. There's a group of children who are making instruments from bits and pieces that they find in the city garbage dump. And they have this entire orchestra of instruments that they play. It sounds like an accomplished professional orchestra.
Wow.
I mean, they are really good. And you look at these instruments that are built out of sardine cans and just the most bizarre things. And they sound just like real professional violins and oboes and so forth. And flutes and saxophones, and just they sound like the real instrument, but they're made completely out of trash.
Yeah.
I mean, the ingenuity of these is incredible.
And they're coming together as a group. They move,
Yeah.
move beyond
Learning
competitiveness.
collaboration, learning synchronicity,
Yeah.
learning to be a team.
Yep.
What an amazing vision.
It's amazing. It's amazing that one group can create something like that. It's just something unique.
But I don't think you'll discover stuff like that until you set the existing systems aside.
Yeah,
This is the way we've always done it. Well, then we've probably done it long enough.
We've always done it competitively, and at the time being, competitiveness did serve its purpose. At the time being, there's no right or wrong, and it's just that's what all humanity knows. But I think in time, as we evolve, we realize, okay, this is no longer serves us as a community and as a collective species. It's time to move to the next step. We don't no longer need that.
And I want to stop short of telling people who have won trophies and ribbons that they shouldn't feel proud of those.
Yeah.
Those are symbols of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Go ahead, feel proud of them. I have nothing bad to say about that. I would just encourage them to use that launching pad of accomplishment.
Yeah.
As somebody said, who I apologize, I don't remember the author now. No one stands so tall as when he stoops to help another.
Mm-hmm.
To use that accomplishment to become a champion and a hero and a advocate for everybody coming after you. To be a trailblazer and take your accomplishment and make it everybody's accomplishment.
Yeah.
Like the African word Ubuntu, that my accomplishment becomes our accomplishment, rather than even needing to compete for who gets to feel good about this. Well, we all do. In the same way that a village would feel proud of one of its members accomplishing something, the person who did the accomplishment would feel proud of his villagers for having the solidarity to have a collective communal spirit about the whole thing.
Mm.
There was an anecdote I read a number of years ago that I got by email that I don't know if it's a true story exactly when and where it happened, but if I remember correctly, it was supposed to have occurred in the state of Washington at a particular event of what's called the Special Olympics.
Mm.
It was youth of all sorts of different disabilities, cerebral palsy uh, and Down syndrome and so on. It was a 50-yard dash, and they all lined up at the starting line, and the guns sounded, and they all moved away from the starting line as fast as they could in whatever fashion they were able to move. And there was a particular young boy with cerebral palsy who took a few steps, stumbled, and fell, and started to cry. And they stopped, every single one of them. And they all came back, every single participant. And they helped him up to his feet, and a girl with Down syndrome kissed his forehead and said, "Here, that'll help." And then they linked arms and walked to the finish line as one solid line.
Wow.
And the crowd was cheering wildly by the time they got to the end. And the whole point of it, like Ubuntu, the African word of I am because we are, it was the reminder that sometimes it's not about who wins, but it's about making sure that everybody does in whatever way they can. And that, to me, really remains the ideal, the inspiration, the goal of human experience, that we find a way to link arms and all march to the finish line together. That it doesn't have to be either you or me, but that it becomes both you and me in every situation, when love and compassion are so much more important than hierarchical valuation. You know, the notion that whoever wins is somehow more special or more important. To instead say that everyone matters and to live like we mean it. You know, and if somebody wins, that means they get to lead the charge of including everybody else. They get to be the first servant to help everyone who didn't win. The first and hopefully the most committed. You know, when Princess Diana was killed in that car accident, I recall reading, if I remember correctly, that she was involved in over 500 different charities around the world. She didn't have to be involved in any one of them. She was a princess, for crying out loud. She certainly didn't need the notoriety or the money, but it was who she was. And that's why the whole world stopped and took notice for her funeral, because she had so invested herself in others. That, to me, is true winning.
Amazing.
Any final thoughts for our viewers as we wind up this complicated episode?
So I'm just going to say that pretty much moving beyond competitiveness and living in a state of cooperation and support, working together through cooperating together with support and love and team building together will allow us to rise beyond distraction and fear. Because ego, using the word ego, and distracts us from our connection. Because we're being competitive, saying we're better. It's important to honor the sacredness of who we are, which is being supportive with ourselves and others equally in unconditional love.
No, it's the two terms I coin embodying what you've just described. When I was trying to explain individuality to people, because as an autistic person, I always see individuality first and community second. And I said, it's about, all the characterizations I always ran into for individuality were always describing narcissistic individuality. That which is very selfish and self-centered and focused inward. And I said, no, equal to that is relational individuality, that which recognizes all of your own characteristics, but understands that even in its best sense, always individuality exists within a constellation of relationships. There's always a constellation of relationships. There needs to be. There's supposed to be. And, that's what makes love work. Anyway, thank you very much for everything you've shared today.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for being such a wonderful
blessing.
guest. And thank you for joining us.